In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news updates, including some more updates from the NHL Waiver Wire. We have a potential suspension coming for Caps forward Garnett Hatheway, and we also have some trade rumors concerning the Buffalo Sabres, Toronto Maple Leafs, Calgary Flames, and the Minnesota Wild. We'll talk about all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news updates, and let's get started with a couple of quick hits here, starting with the waiver wire. Now, yesterday we talked about the fact the longtime veteran goaltender Corey Schneider had been placed on waivers for the purpose of being assigned to the American Hockey League. Of course, it was no big surprise, he went unclaimed, so therefore the New Jersey Devils have assigned him down to their American Hockey League affiliate in Binghamton. So now, I guess for the time being at least, we'll have a duo of Mackenzie Blackwood and Louis Domingue be the NHL goaltending tandem for New Jersey. So clearly I kind of feel bad for Schneider in a way. I mean, he's been a long time goaltender, battled a lot of injuries. Thankfully, I guess for his sake, he does have a fair bit of term on his contract, which is bad for the team, but good for him from a financial standpoint. But he'll earn his $6 million a year for the time being while he's in the minors. Not really clear if he'll get another opportunity. It's probably going to depend on how that goes and how he plays down there. Can he stay healthy, which is the big question. Injuries have certainly taken its toll on the goaltender, and we'll see how he can bounce back or if that's even possible. But for right now, he will be playing down in the American Hockey League. Now, also on the waiver wire today is LA Kings forward Mario Kempe, brother of Adrian Kempe, for the purpose of being terminated. So that contract is going to be voided between the Kings and Kempe, and he is heading over to play in the KHL. He'd been mostly been a minor league player for the Kings after signing on with them earlier this past offseason, and things were not really working out. Wasn't exactly what he had envisioned, so he had more of an opportunity in the KHL, so he's heading over there for the remainder of the season. Now, as I mentioned, we have a potential suspension coming for Caps forward Garnett Hatheway after an incident between the Washington Capitals and the Anaheim Ducks. The situation late in the game where Capitals' fourth line of Hatheway as well as Brendan Leipzig were throwing a lot of big hits. Things were getting chippy between the two teams in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And ultimately, he ended up spitting on Ducks defenseman Erik Gudbranson. It's kind of a really gross thing to do. I guess the closest thing I can think of that kind of related to would be like the Brad Marchand licking episodes that we saw a bit in the not too distant past. Clearly the NHL did not like the licking and eventually did hand out a suspension to Marchand. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how this is being handled. He was given a match penalty and kicked out of the game, so obviously that will be factored in as well. I've heard a variety of opinions on this on various NHL programming and social media today. I've seen some people thinking that what happened in the game was enough. I've seen some people say maybe a 1 to 2 game suspension. I've seen some people say maybe 5 or more to kind of send a message that this is extremely disgusting and not something that we should be seeing in the NHL. I'm not really sure exactly where this falls, but I do think some sort of supplementary discipline is justified. It's a really gross and disgusting thing to do, and something that the NHL really shouldn't be tolerating. So I would be expecting some kind of suspension for Hatheway. I guess we'll have to wait and see what Player Safety announces. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to find out. General Manager Brian McClellan of the Capitals in a recent interview did indicate that he felt something was likely coming, but they were waiting on a word from the league as to how this was going to be handled. So I guess we'll discuss further once that's been announced. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the Hatheway situation. Do you think he should be suspended? And if so, what do you feel is appropriate? Now, jumping into today's NHL trade rumors, I want to start with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, we've been talking for some time that they're likely going to trade a defenseman. They've had a lot of injuries, kind of waiting to get things healthy, and they're getting to that point where they're almost there and likely could be ready to make a move. Of course, they really weren't in a rush early in the season. Things were going extremely well, and when you're winning lots of hockey games and you have lots of depth, you're really not in a situation where you feel pressured to make a move, and it's exactly where the Sabres were at. But like last year, after a hot start, the Sabres are starting to kind of fall down here and have had a rough time as of late. They're at a situation now where that blue line is getting more and more healthy, and we might see some moves made by General Manager Jason Gaudreau to kind of boost the scoring up front, especially where they've had some injuries now. Vladimir Sobotka is going to be out for a while, and then we also found out the Sabres forward Kyle Okposo is going to be out for an indefinite period of time after suffering another concussion. That's his 4th concussion in about 2.5 years. So sometimes these can be pretty severe. Concussions are very unpredictable at best, so it's really hard to say exactly what kind of timelines he's looking at. Obviously having so many concussions in such a short period of time is certainly quite dangerous, and certainly could put things in question for his future. So I guess we'll remain to be seen here what's going to go on with Okposo. We certainly wish him a speedy recovery, but obviously that puts the Sabres in a tough spot where they might have to take advantage of that blue line depth to acquire somebody up front who can help out, and provide some type of scoring punch as a secondary scoring after a couple of their top players like Skinner and Eichel, who are having pretty decent seasons so far. Now, one defenseman who has been a healthy scratch as of late that might be a player that they might be looking to move would be one they acquired this past offseason. That's defenseman Colin Miller. Now, Miller's a little bit of a surprise we're in this predicament. I really thought he would fit in better and be a better help to the Sabres decor, but right now he seems to be the odd man out. A lot of nights he's been scratched for 3 consecutive games. Between himself and Marco Scandella, they seem like the most likely trade candidates right now. Scandella for the fact that he's a pending unrestricted free agent. They very well might not be able to bring him back for the future. And then, of course, where Miller's been a healthy scratch lately, I could see either one, maybe even both, or at least, but probably not both right away, be moved to acquire some forwards who can possibly help out. Now, they have some other forwards besides the guys that are injured too, that are struggling, like I mentioned before. Even like a Jimmy Vesey hasn't worked out in Buffalo either. I'm sure they'd be open to moving him, but I can certainly see Gaudreau trying to make some kind of a package deal here and get something that can help their team in short order, because obviously they don't want to have a repeat of what happened last year where they had such a hot start and then completely fall out, not only fall out of the playoffs, but really fall down in the standings and have another overall bad season, because the Sabres seem like they've been rebuilding forever. Well, last year and then this year they've had some good starts, and they obviously want to build on that and take things up a notch. So we'll see what happens here, but the Sabres are certainly in the market for a forward, and they have lots of depth on the blue line who can certainly help them make that kind of transaction. Now, for the fourthperiod.com is reporting that the Minnesota Wild are getting a lot of calls on a variety of players. Unfortunately for them, a lot of them are not the longer term contracts for older players that I'm sure they would prefer to part with, but because of their salary cap situation and all those veteran long-term deals, they're kind of in an awkward position where they need to trade younger, more valuable forwards and defensemen to bring them back some more valuable assets for the future. I do think if the Wild go into selling mode here, that more likely they're going to be looking for more prospects and picks for future than they would be for immediate roster players. I think the Wild really need to have themselves a higher draft pick in the first round this year and acquire as many young assets as they can to kind of start the process of a rebuild. Now, one player who doesn't seem to be getting a lot of attention right now, but likely will, according to this article, later in the season, and makes sense, would be veteran forward and captain Mikko Koivu, who's also a pending unrestricted free agent. I would imagine that general manager Bill Guerin, as much as he probably values Koivu in a lot of ways, likely wouldn't bring him back. They certainly need to get younger, faster, more skilled, and their aging captain certainly does not fit that bill any longer. So I would suspect that if Koivu is going to continue playing beyond this year, that he will have to find a new home after the season. So I would imagine he would be a pretty good deadline piece. I don't think that's something that's going to happen right away. That'd be something closer to the deadline. But the fourthperiod.com, like I said, they're reporting that calls are coming through on a lot of younger pieces like Jason Zucker, like Kevin Fiala, Ryan Donato, even Jonas Brodin on the blue line. And a couple of these guys we've talked about before. Donato's a name that's been mentioned recently. Of course, Zucker's been a name that came up a lot in the rumor mill of the past couple of years. Of course, the trade's never come to be. Of course, the former GM Paul Fenton tried to trade Zucker on multiple occasions and it failed every time. He does have a partial no trade clause as well, and I know he and his wife are big members of the Minnesota community as well, so certainly could be a big blow for them to trade Zucker, although I understand what they're trying to accomplish. Doesn't mean that they want to trade him, but just they're getting calls and interest. I mean, he's a guy who can certainly score. He's proven that in the past, and he can be very quick and speedy as well, and he has some skills, so he could be a good fit with a lot of other teams. And of course, same thing goes for Fiala and Donato. In the right situation, they could certainly really thrive and take their careers up a notch. So we'll see what happens here. There's no clear-cut response here that Guerin's got what exactly he's going to do, but they're getting lots of calls on all these players, and at some point here, the selling is going to have to kick off. Now, as we reported on a few days ago as well, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs are in a situation now where there's been some more trade rumors about them, especially on defenseman Tyson Barrie that was first brought up this past Saturday on Saturday Headlines with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston on Hockey Night in Canada, talking about the fact that Barrie really hasn't fit in well. Of course, it's a contract year for him, and apparently the Leafs have had discussions with his agents that they're not real pleased with how things have gone, how he's being used, and the fact where he's in a contract year. He obviously wants to be better utilized and put in more of a position to to succeed and put up the offense like he used to, and he's just not being used the same way. When he was in Colorado, he was basically a rover out there, kind of like you see with Brent Burns with the San Jose Sharks. He had all kinds of power play time, and he's just not getting the same kind of deployment with Babcock and the Leafs. And of course, that's not exactly helpful for him to continue his production so he can be more successful and land his next big contract next offseason. It's been clearly noted here that Barrie has not officially requested a trade, but his agents have made it clear to the Leafs that they're not real pleased with how things have gone. And Johnston himself has admitted that Barrie's not really a great fit in Toronto, and he does see them trading him sometime later into the season, but not quite just yet here. He feels that this road trip, basically the Leafs are about to kick off. They start the first game tonight against Vegas, that this road trip could be an extremely telling time for the Maple Leafs and decisions they make going forward, whether it be a trade or even Mike Babcock's future, which we've discussed here recently as well. There's all kinds of Leaf fans out there calling for him to be fired. A lot of Leaf fans want change, but there's also many Leaf fans out there who see a lot of value in the experience with Babcock and that he's a good coach, and ultimately it's the team makeup which ultimately falls on the general manager. Personally, I think they can place blame on the GM, the coach, and the players themselves, all spread around. Things have just not quite worked out the way they expect it to. I think the roster could be made up a little bit different. I think he could certainly adapt as a coach and have some new strategies in there, and I think the players certainly could do a little bit better as well. So I think the blame needs to be spread around, but this road trip is going to be huge for the Leafs. Would not be shocking if they have a terrible road trip, that if Mike Babcock could even possibly be let go during the road trip. That would not be shocked at all, or to see Kyle Dubas possibly pull off some type of a trade. But a trade is going to be tough given their salary cap situation. According to Johnston, he doesn't think Barrie would be moved just yet, but he is an attractive piece a lot of other teams are looking at because of the cap hit. Colorado had retained half of his income during the trade with Nazem Kadri, so the cap hit for Barrie is pretty low for anybody looking to make an acquisition. So the calls will continue to come in until something either gets turned around or it gets dealt in Toronto. Now, lastly here, there's a lot more frustration continuing to build in Calgary, as we've touched on recently as well. And there's even an article in The Athletic talking about the possibility, could the Flames actually trade star player Johnny Gaudreau? Johnny Hockey himself has been coming under a lot of scrutiny after a little bit of a slow start. If you look at the production between Gaudreau, Monahan, Lindholm, it's really not that bad. It's not quite at last year's pace, for example, but overall, I think they're having an okay season. Pretty decent. I mean, really nothing to be too concerned about. It seems odd, I think, in my opinion, that the finger's being pointed at him, but I guess a lot of people are questioning, as being the top player on the team, is can they win with him being that top guy, the top forward to generate a lot of the offense? Obviously, we've seen Matthew Tkachuk come a long way with his development over the past few years and could be slowly working his way to kind of taking over being the top forward on the team, but there's certainly a question that's out there. I mean, between the blue line issues that the Flames have had, and there was some talk about Brody being traded. Of course, that could be on hold now, given the health scare he recently had. Of course, they had the Valimaki injury in the offseason, which changed the whole dynamic. So the Flames are kind of in a spot where they had a really solid year last year. They need to take some steps forward, and they're just not getting the job done. I can't imagine Coach Bill Peters would be in trouble here as of yet. A different situation than Babcock with the Leafs. I know I've seen some speculating a potential trade between these two teams because they are sort of in similar situations where they had really good years last year and were expected to take steps this year moving forward, having probably another 100-plus point season, make the playoffs, and make it past the first round. That was the goal for each of these teams and the expectation by many fans, which is really, I think, fair to say that these teams should be able to accomplish that given their makeup. But there are some suggestions out there that maybe the Leafs should contact the Flames and swap Tyson Barrie for one of their defensemen like a TJ Brody, which I personally don't see happening. I think you'd have to include more than just Brody, and it would be tough to work out as well from a salary cap perspective. I mean, Tyson Barrie's low cap hit would be attractive to a team like the Flames if they did want to acquire somebody, but obviously the Leafs would be very limited on what they could take back for salary, so that would be tricky as well. They'd have to talk to the Flames about retaining to kind of even things out. I don't know if that's really an even trade. I think the Flames would have to throw in more than just Brody. I can see the Leafs maybe wanting to go for more of a defensive style defenseman perhaps, but not really sure if that's the answer, but it seems as though the fan base and some of the local writers around to cover the Flames are calling for the possibility that we might see something drastic out of Calgary in the next little while here, or maybe even into next offseason, if something does not change with the Flames. And even star player Johnny Gaudreau at this point doesn't seem like he's untouchable. So I guess my question to you, especially if you're a Flames fan out there, if the Flames do not continue to improve and things do not go well here over the next few weeks, could you see a big trade coming to kind of shake things up? And do you think Johnny Gaudreau could actually be moved as part of that? Does that make sense if you're the Calgary Flames? So, that is all your latest news updates for today. Of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.